Hello students, so today I'm going to start the topic known as array of class objects. Now if you look over here, the first statement declares an array variable A that can hold at most 10 integer values, so its data type is int. The second statement declares an array variable B that can hold at the most 10 characters. That's why its data type is char. And the third statement declares an array variable C that can also hold at the most 10 floating point numbers. And that's the reason its data type is float. Now what type of data types are these? These are the standard predefined data types used in C++. That means each of these data types, that is int, char and float, are already defined in the C++ library. When you first install C++ inside your system, all these data types will already be defined in the library. That's why we have A here representing an array of 10 integers, B here representing an array of 10 characters, and C here representing an array of 10 floating point numbers. But if you look at this array represented by the name EMP, this is not an array of integers or characters or floating point numbers. Instead, this will represent an array of 10 objects, as they are of type employee, which is nothing but a class. Now if you look at this class object model diagram, here lion, elephant and tiger are a kind of entities that exist in our real world, and each of these real world entities, that is lion, elephant and tiger, is an animal, so we can classify them as animal, and this forms a class object model diagram where these real world entities lion, elephant and tiger represents objects, and when they are classified under a common name known as animal, then animal will represent the class for these objects. So lion is a type of animal. Similarly, elephant is also a type of animal, and then tiger is also a type of animal. In short, we can say that a group of similar objects forms a class. So here lion, elephant and tiger falls under the same class known as animal. Now if you look at this particular statement, here EMP represents an array of 10 objects because they fall under a class known as employee. So each of these 10 objects, starting from EMP0, then EMP1, then EMP2 till EMP9, shall be of type employee. For such reasons, here the class employee acts as a data type. But unlike these three data types, int, char and float, which are already defined in the C++ library, this is not, because this is user defined. The user has to define this class named employee and then set the properties and behavior for this class employee. And it is for this reason that this class employee here acts as a user defined data type. So now it is clear that the class acts as a user defined data type. Now let me focus on this topic, which is array of class objects. So just as you can declare arrays of common data types such as int, char, float, etc., you can also declare arrays of class objects. This statement is an example. Here EMP10 represents an array by the name EMP that can hold at the most 10 objects. And since objects are created with the help of a class, so here the class employee forms a user-defined data type. Now refer to this section 4.9 of the chapter in your book. There is a program. I am going to explain that program out here now. So here we have a class by the name employee. These are the private data members. This cal_da is the private member function. Its implementation part is also visible. Again, we have 4 member functions which are declared as public. The implementation details for these member functions are hidden. So we can see some abstraction in these member functions which are declared inside the class called employee. Then the class body ends here with a semicolon. The implementation details for each of these functions are shown outside the class. This is for the member function input_data declared outside the class with the help of the scope resolution operator. This is the implementation part of the member function display. Similarly, this is the implementation part for the member function cal_hra, which is also declared outside of the class with the help of this scope resolution operator. And the same is the case with this member function cal_gross. It also shows these implementation details outside the class. Now the program is going to start from the main function, as main is the inception of the program. Now the first statement inside the main function body declares an array of max objects. The name of this array that can hold max objects is EMP, and its class name is employee. Now the point to note here is that what is the value of max? If you see the beginning of the program, I have assigned the value 10 to max, and max becomes a constant as it is preceded by the keyword const, const. So just because I have preceded max with a const keyword, so max now no longer becomes a variable. Max is a constant now, which holds an integer value 10 as its data type is int. So this value 10 that shall be assigned to max becomes a constant value. And all of you, as you already know, that constant values cannot be changed, so this value 10 that is assigned to max shall become a fixed value for max. It cannot be changed later on again. So in this case, here max will denote the constant value 10. So this statement shall create an array of 10 objects, where 10 is the value of max. Now this is represented by this class object model diagram, where employee is the class name, and each of those 10 objects are represented as EMP0, EMP1, EMP2 till EMP9. If you count from EMP0 till EMP9, how many objects are there? There are 10 objects in total, and all these objects falls under the same class known as employee. So EMP max, where max is 10. Now as soon as this object gets created, the data members and the member functions belonging to the class known as employee shall be bundled together to form an encapsulation. Okay, the data members and the member functions shall be bundled together into a single unit to form an encapsulation. Once the encapsulation has been formed, this encapsulation shall be bind or tied to this object. Then these data members and the member functions shall operate upon this object, and this is an array of 10 objects. For each of these objects, the data member and the member functions shall be encapsulated together into a single unit, and then it shall be tied into this object, and after that these data members and member functions shall operate upon each of these objects. Now once the object has been created and the encapsulation of data members and member functions has been tied into this object, then the next statement starts with a for loop where the value of I starts with 0, and it shall continue till what point? Till I less than max. Now as we know that the value of max was 10, so I less than max means I less than 10. Okay, now if I is less than 10, the last value of I will be 9. So this for loop is going to continue from 0 till 9. The very first value for I shall be 0, and for I equal to 0, when it enters inside this for loop, empi becomes emp0, which is this first object. Now using the first object emp0, I am trying to access the member function input underscore data. Now the question is this object given the permission to access this member function? We shall come to know by looking at its access specifier. Now if you look at this member function input underscore data, its access specifier is public. Now you already know that public members can be accessible from outside of the class. So from outside of the class, which is the main function, I can easily access the member function input underscore data with the help of the first object emp0. And once that is done, I am going to input the input the employee code, employee name, employee designation, and his basic salary by executing this member function. So for the first time, all these inputs shall be for the object emp0. Again, the for loop is going to iterate by this command, that is I++. Now the value of I is going to change from 0 to 1. This time empi becomes emp1, and again here the object emp1 calls the member function input underscore data. And in the same way, I am going to input the details for employee code, employee name, employee designation, and basic salary again, this time for the object emp1, as the value of I has been incremented to 1. So that is for the second object emp1. So in the similar way, the for loop is going to iterate again and again. Okay, the value of I is going to increase again and again. Okay, next time the value of I is going to be 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, and finally the value of I is going to reach 9. For every value of I, we create different calls to this function input data to input the employee code, employee designation, employee name, and basic salary. In this way, we can input 10 different employees information associated with 10 different objects, starting from emp0 and ending at emp9. Now once the value of I reaches 9, the for loop ends or terminates here, and then it moves to the next statement. In the next statement, you can see another for loop. Again here, the value of I starts with 0, and then it is going to continue till 9. Because the value of max is 10, so I less than max denotes I less than 10, which is definitely going to give the last value of I as 9. So the value of I shall range from 0 to 9 again. Okay, now if you come inside the body of this for loop, when the value of I is 0, this is the first object, okay, emp0, because empi, when the value of I is 0, becomes emp0, this one. Now with the help of emp0, I am trying to access these member functions display, cal underscore hra, and cal underscore gross. Now the access to the object has been granted or permitted because each of these member functions, they are declared as public inside the class. And once the access has been granted, the object emp0 can easily access and execute these member functions display cal underscore hra and cal underscore gross. For the member function display, when it is accessed by the object emp0, it is going to execute these implementation details. That is, it's first going to display the employee code, then the employee name, designation, basic salary, and then the dearness allowance. The call to calculate the dearness allowance will be through this function, that is cal underscore da. So this acts as the calling function, and from here the control is going to jump till here, and then it is going to execute this member function cal underscore da. Now if you look at this member function cal underscore da, this has been declared as private. Now if this is declared as private, how are we able to access it through this member function, which is display? Yes, this is possible. As I have already explained you that private members can be easily accessed by the member functions of a class. So whether the member function be it a private member function or a public member function or a protected member function, it can easily access the private members of the class. Now since the member function display, as you can see here, this is a public member function which is inside the class known as employee. Now as member functions can access the private members, so it's going to easily access this private member function, that is void cal underscore da. So that's it. Accessing the private member cal underscore da has been permitted because display is a member function of the class named employee. In the same way, with the help of the object emp0, I am going to invoke or call this member function cal underscore hra, which is then going to compute the hra or the house rent allowance of the employee. And then in the next step, it prints the house rent allowance. Then in the last step, with the help of the same object emp0, it is invoking the member function cal underscore gross. In this member function, it is calculating the value of gross as emp salary plus hra plus da, and then it prints the gross salary as gross, the value of which will be shown. After executing these three statements, the control is going to move to the for loop again. Now it is going to iterate the value of I by 1. The previous value of I was 0. Now the new value of I will become 1. So now empi becomes emp1. So in the same way, it is going to invoke the member function display cal hra and cal gross. Again, the for loop is going to iterate. The value of I shall be incremented. The previous value of I was 1. Now the new value of I will become 2. When the value of I will become 2, empi will become emp2. Okay, so emp2. Again, for the object emp2, it is going to invoke the member functions display cal hra and cal gross. Similarly, the value of I is going to iterate again. The new value of I is going to become 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the last value of I is going to become 9. Okay, as a result, all these objects are going to be created starting from emp0 till emp9, and for each of these objects, okay, the member functions display cal hra and cal gross are going to be invoked, where the member function display is going to print the or display the employee code, employee name, employee designation, basic salary, and the dearness allowance. Member function cal hra is going to print the or is going to compute the hra as 0.15 into emp salary, and then it's going to print the value for the house rent allowance. Then the member function cal gross is going to compute the value of gross as emp salary plus hra plus da, and then it is going to print the gross salary. Now if you look at this program logic is modeled on a real world application where you are creating 10 different objects which are modeled on a prototype known as the class employee, and then you bind the properties and the behavior of this class employee into this object, forming an encapsulation. The data members such as EMP code, employee name, employee designation, employee salary, HRA and DA, these are the properties for this class known as employee, or we can say these are the characteristics for this class known as employee. And these member functions known as calDA, input data display, calHRA and calGross, these member functions represent the behaviors shown by this class known as employee. So this class consists of different properties and it shows different behaviors. The object getting created shall be modeled on this class known as employee. That's why the object is going to take all the properties and the behaviors out of this class employee. Now remember that the class employee is just a blueprint, or you can say it's just the prototype. It is the object which must interact with this class to associate itself with the properties of the class and also to associate itself with its behaviors to show all these behaviors of the class. So we can say that these are the objects which interacts with the class to make the entire application run. Remember, the class by itself is dormant because it's just a prototype for the objects to implement, and the objects interact with the class to give energy into the system so that the application starts to execute. Once the objects are created, using these objects I input the employee details, display the employee details, calculate the HRA and then display it, calculate the gross and then display it. So this program logic is modeled on a real world application where you get to input the information of 10 different employees and then display those information, followed by calculating and displaying the HRA and the gross amount. And that's all about this array of object stuff. And with this I end my first video today.